Hi, I'm Jessica, and thanks for joining me for my Learning to Watercolor class on behalf of Stampin' Up. The goal here today is just to introduce you to watercoloring and show you through this two-part virtual class a couple of different very easy methods to watercoloring your images and your stamps for your projects and your cards. Watercoloring is really fun, it's very easy, and it really adds a very professional and very artsy touch to your project, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get our materials ready. Two things I do want to say really quickly is feel free to pause this video in case I'm talking too fast at any point. I would encourage you to work alongside with me. Sometimes when you're doing it while you're hearing the instructions, it's a little bit easier. And then the second thing is I just apologize. The video is not, video quality is not the best, but I will definitely do my best to ensure that you have a very close-up view to everything that I'm doing. Okay, this is a two-part video class. The first part and the second part will both be available in the same invitation, but you do need to watch the first part and the second part to get the whole class. Different things are discussed in both. You can definitely do the first one and not the second one or the other way around, okay? Alright, so to get started, let's make sure we have our materials. The first thing that you're going to need is going to be your watercoloring pencils, okay? These are Stampin' Up! Watercolor pencils, and it comes in a set of 24 very good quality watercolor pencils, excellent quality. And you typically also want to make sure you have your sharpener out as well, because you never know when it'll go dull, and you just want to be prepared. Okay. The second most crucial element to this activity are your watercolor pens. And this is one of my watercolor pens here. Okay. This is my watercolor pen. You will notice there's water inside here. To open this up, you just unscrew the top, pull it off, like so, run it under the faucet, fill it up about 3/4 of the way, or about 2/3, more like 2/3, and then put the top back on. You may notice after you used it a couple times, the tip of your watercolor pen begins to turn a color. It's perfectly fine. That doesn't necessarily mean it will rub off on your project. You just need to make sure that you, just like you scrub your stamps, you want to also scrub the tip of this with your stamping mist on your scrub pad to make sure that it's clean. You also want to keep it pretty moist, but not wet. It shouldn't be dry, it shouldn't be wet, it should be very much in between, okay? So that's this is the narrower pen, and then this is the larger pen tip. Okay, and you'll notice that I don't use this one very often. Today we'll be just using the finer tip point. Okay, now that you have your pencils and your pen, the next thing that you need is you need your ink. You need to figure out what color you want to stamp in. Okay, I would suggest for this beginning watercoloring, stamping in black or brown. I have both. I have the basic brown ink pad, and I also will be using a black marker. Instead of using a black stamp pad, I'll be using a marker, but I'm able to accomplish the same thing. Might just be a little bit more tedious because it's a marker tip instead of an ink pad. Okay? So once you've selected your ink color, if you're not sure, I would definitely just have black and brown out just in case. But I definitely think starting with black or brown is where you want to be, especially for the beginning. When we do part 2, we'll talk a little bit about using colors and how that kind of changes things up a little bit. Okay, but black and brown are very versatile for starting off. Okay, the next thing you're going to need for this part of the class is a stamp that has an image on it. It can also have a word on it, but you want to make sure it has an image that has very wide spaces. Okay, let me show you an example of one you would not want to use for starting. This stamp is a birthday cake stamp, and it might look like it has kind of a wide size to it on the cake part, but because the flowers, I wouldn't suggest this for beginning watercoloring. I would suggest this for part 2 of the video, but not part 1. For part 1, you want to use a stamp that has an image that's pretty wide open. Okay, here's an example of one. I'm going to be using this love stamp. okay, and it has a very wide heart in the middle, and that's where I'm going to be focusing our watercoloring techniques. Go ahead and take a moment, pause the video if you need to, and gather your materials, and I'll be right here when you come back so we can get started. Okay, so I assume you have all your materials by now. The first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to play around with our pencils. We're going to learn how our pencils work and how the watercoloring kind of works. There is one material that I did not tell you to get, silly me, and that is paper. Okay, this is Whisper White, 12 by 12 Whisper White cardstock. You want a big piece of paper, you can definitely use scraps. I would definitely recommend using white for this activity because you can see the true colors of your pencils on white. And then once you get a little bit more skilled, you can start to play with them on different color papers. Okay, so for starters, I'm going to select a color pencil to just begin seeing how they work. I'm also going to angle the camera down so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay? Alrighty. There we go. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is I want you to pick a watercolor pencil. I would suggest using a purple or a blue, something with a very bold color. I would not recommend using a yellow or a light pink. You want to use a color that's pretty heavy for this first part. I am going to select purple. Okay? All right. Checking the tip. Always check the tip of your pencil. You want to make sure that it's sharpened and ready. If not, you always have your sharpener handy. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to draw 3 lines. Watch first, then do. Okay, and again, pause when you need to. The first line I'm going to draw is going to be very hard. I'm going to draw a very hard line, and I want to conserve paper here, so I'm going to work in the top left area. Okay, I'm going to draw a hard line. Okay, you don't want to break the pencil, but you definitely want to make it a very intentional line. Okay, go ahead and try that. Draw a hard line. Okay, now that you've got your hard line drawn, go ahead and draw a line just as intentional, but a little bit softer, okay? I want you to aim to make your line just a little bit lighter this time. Not too light, but a little bit lighter, okay? Notice the difference between the 2 lines. Go ahead and try that. You're going to make a second line very intentionally, but a little bit lighter. Not too light. Okay? Notice the difference between the 2 lines. Okay? And finally, we're going to make one more line. This line, I want you to make it as light as possible. Definitely make the line so that you can see it, but make it as light as possible. Okay. Go ahead and try that if you have not already. You should have 3 lines on your paper. Okay, now let's talk about these lines for just a second. Okay, so you'll notice that the technique that you used without me telling you was pressing very hard to make the line darker and pressing very lightly, or not pressing very hard at all, to make the line light. That is the exact technique you use in watercoloring. It's very important to be very intentional with how much pressure you're putting on the pencil because it will determine how your watercolor will come out, okay?